and man shall turn again unto dust. Job 34:15.
Only ashes remain of those who inhabited the world of the Bible. But beneath these desolate sands lie secrets of their encounter with the divine. Today, in the footsteps of the ancients, archaeologists are seeking to unearth those secrets. Did the children of Israel leave behind tangible clues as they followed Abraham and joined in a covenant with God? Does evidence endure of their delivery from bondage in Egypt by Moses? Do clues await discovery which can verify the miraculous deeds of Jesus? Can archaeology corroborate the events which the Bible says took place here thousands of years ago?
In general, the record is good, despite the fact that there remain deep mysteries and dark secrets of things which don't work out and things which we don't understand and probably never will.
What draws archaeologists from all over the world to this ancient landscape?
I was enthralled with the notion that the Bible was not just some sort of mystical document that had appeared out of nowhere, but that it was rooted in soil, in rocks, in the ground of antiquity, and that it involved real people.
As the 21st century beckons, how is this passion for the past enlivened by the latest marvels of science?
Technology is transforming the field. Archaeology has really opened doors to our understanding of the Bible that was never available to us before.
Today, the most advanced tools of science are being used to examine the holiest of lands, as archaeologists attempt to solve the mysteries of the Bible. The once ancient landscape of the Holy Land is now dominated by the modern, where centuries before stood humble towns of mud bricks, radiant new cities thrive. But buried directly beneath these modern dwellings, sometimes just below the surface, is the living history of the Bible. Among the hundreds of sites throughout Israel where the biblical past is being resurrected is the ancient city of Beersheba. Here, archaeologists have discovered 9 separate levels of settlement, dating back more than 3,000 years. It is in these ancient streets, according to the Bible, that Abraham, patriarch of the Jewish people, once walked. The Bible also tells us that Abraham, in a critical search for water, obtained the rights to use a well here. Tradition holds that this is Abraham's well, but as yet no archaeological evidence has emerged to confirm it. At Beersheba and throughout the Holy Land, one tantalizing question persists. How does the history being unearthed here compare to the account passed down in the Bible?
The archaeological account, more often than not, coincides with the biblical account of what happened. The Bible as a book, as a history book is generally reliable, insofar as we can check it.
The science of archaeology, barely a century old, has but scratched the surface of Israel's hidden treasures. Surprisingly, however, in that short span of time, the Holy Land has already yielded a wealth of illuminating secrets. Ancient cities, lost for untold thousands of years, have risen again from the dust. Almost all we know of these cities and the events said to have occurred there, we have learned from one source, the Bible. But how accurate is the history contained in this ancient text?
When the trumpet sounded, the people shouted, and the walls came tumbling down. Joshua 6:13.
Jericho. A certain mystique lingers in the very name. Here, the Bible tells us, occurred antiquity's most legendary military confrontation. Archaeologists have confirmed that Jericho indeed met with a catastrophic end. But debate still rages as to when it occurred and if Joshua was truly its conqueror. Capernaum, the hallowed home of Jesus on the Sea of Galilee. According to the Bible, more of Christ's miracles were performed here than in any other city. It was in Capernaum that his legend as a teacher took root.
They went into Capernaum, and on the Sabbath day he entered into the synagogue and taught. Mark 1:21.
Beneath this ancient synagogue lie traces of an even earlier structure, which some archaeologists believe may have been the nucleus of Jesus' earth-shaking ministry. Megiddo, better known by a name which inspires awe to this day, Armageddon. Looming over one of the most strategic regions of the ancient Near East, it was the bloody site of 3,000 years of war. Here, the book of Revelation foretells one final battle between good and evil will be waged.
I saw the beast and the kings of the earth gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse, and against his army. Revelation 19:19.
Armageddon, the flashpoint which will signal the end of the world. In the rubble of such ancient cities, archaeologists painstakingly unearth the biblical past. The Bible is their treasure map, but it's also the prime focus of their scrutiny.
One of the enduring goals of biblical archaeology is to solve the one great mystery of the Bible, namely, how good is the text itself? How closely does the Isaiah which we read match the words which Isaiah himself must have said in Jerusalem 2,500 years ago?
In recent decades, vital clues have been unearthed which shed light on the Bible's degree of historical accuracy. Perhaps the most significant is a tiny silver scroll found in an ancient tomb near Jerusalem. Inscribed upon it is a priestly blessing identical to one cited in the Hebrew Bible. Dated to the 7th century before Christ, It was written 400 years before the oldest known biblical text.
The Lord bless thee and keep thee. The Lord make his face shine upon thee, and be gracious unto thee. The Lord lift up his countenance upon thee, and give thee peace. Numbers 6:24.
It is word for word identical with the text which we have of that passage, and therefore it encourages us to have confidence in the validity of the received texts as it has been passed down.
In the history of biblical archaeology, one dramatic discovery stands alone. Ironically, it was not made by an archaeologist, but by a humble shepherd. On a sweltering day in 1947, a young Bedouin stumbled upon a nearly inaccessible cave in the rugged cliffs overlooking the Dead Sea. Inside, within several earthen jars, he found the Dead Sea Scrolls. By sheer accident, he had discovered an ancient library illuminating the very origins of Jewish faith. Among the 800 scrolls are the oldest known versions of all but one of the books of the Hebrew Bible. The rest offer a fascinating glimpse into the religious climate into which Jesus was born. For over 40 years, scholars have been carefully reconstructing the thousands of tiny fragments of this ancient jigsaw puzzle. Only now are the scrolls beginning to yield their secrets. In their quest for such biblical wonders, archaeologists come equipped with the exacting techniques of an established science. But it was not always so. A century ago, those who dug here were mere amateurs, with no scientific discipline to guide them. How did biblical archaeology come into being? Who invented the means to explore our biblical roots? In the late 19th century, pioneers in a new discipline called archaeology were drawn to the Holy Land. Their goal, to determine the accuracy of the history chronicled in the Bible. Foremost among these trailblazing archaeologists was an eccentric British surveyor, Sir William Flinders Petrie. Gifted with a rare genius, Petrie was destined to discover the archaeological key to probing the mysteries of the Bible. Petrie's towering intellect, however, was accompanied by an equally prodigious sense of the bizarre.
As great an impact as he had on the discipline, and as important as he was in the development of archaeology in the Holy Land, he was a bit of a nut. I think we'd have to admit that.
Petrie exhibited his eccentricity on his maiden expedition in 1880 to survey the Great Pyramids of Egypt.
Petrie was the first one to measure the pyramids. And the only way the Egyptians let him measure the pyramids, 100 people had tried it before, and they'd been chased out and stoned and sometimes killed, was that Petrie, this strange small man with a full white beard and bright blue eyes, measured the pyramids in Egypt whilst wearing a ballerina's tutu. This little funny, frilly little dress and tights. Because he was a lunatic. And he benefited from all the protections which lunatics have in Eastern societies.
Despite Petrie's oddity of character, he possessed the disciplined mind of a scientific genius. As he shifted his focus from Egypt to the Holy Land, he made two breakthrough discoveries. He recognized the importance of what those before him had ignored, earthen mounds dotting the landscape, which appeared to be natural features of topography. But what others had assumed to be creations of nature, Petrie recognized as the ancient debris of man. Petrie's discovery became known as the Tell, the accumulation of multiple settlements, each one built on the ruins of an earlier community.
He understood, as many did not before him, that these mounds, these tells, these buried cities in Palestine had been formed layer after layer, one above the other. And the deeper you go, the earlier you go.
Petrie's subsequent discovery was revolutionary. Buried within the strata of the Holy Land, he discovered the key to reconstructing a chronology of all of biblical history. Once again, his observant eye perceived the significance of what others had considered worthless. In the humblest of man-made objects, pottery, he saw archaeological treasure. Each layer in which he dug contained its own unique type of ceramics. Each type was a product of a distinct generation of artisans from the world of the Bible.
The styles, the shapes, the forms, the decoration, the polishing changes from time to time. And you could put these in a sequence and get a relative dating, which he called sequence dating. This is the most important tool for dating ancient Near Eastern archaeological levels. Petrie is responsible for that, and that's why he's rightly called the father of Palestinian archaeology.
In 1943, Sir Flinders Petrie died at the age of 91, after making unusual arrangements for his rare genius to transcend the grave.
When he died in Jerusalem, he had his head amputated, and it was deposited at the American School in Jerusalem in formaldehyde, and it stayed there for decades until it was moved to the Victoria Museum in England. And I think this says it all. Sir Flinders believed that he was so brilliant and so smart that he wanted his brain and all that was in it left to posterity.
Sir Flinders Petrie had opened the doors of enlightenment for a new generation of archaeologists. But it would be left to yet another genius with an intellect as towering as Petrie's to lead the way. His name was William Foxwell Albright.
W.F. Albright is certainly the pivotal figure in 20th century biblical archaeology. What Sir Flinders Petrie and others had done before him, he really refined in a significant way. And so he was the master historian, the master who could put it all together.
He was almost like a computer. You'd put in a new fact and everything would jiggle and reassemble to have a new synthesis.
In 1919, Albright began concentrating his genius at digs throughout the Holy Land. He came equipped with an encyclopedic knowledge of the Bible and a fluent mastery of the languages of the ancient Near East. His precise and painstaking efforts to unearth proof of biblical history became a model for all others to follow.
Today, much of Albright's agenda remains unachieved, but he deserves to be remembered as the founder of the discipline. He believed that archaeology and the Bible belonged together, that you could not separate them, that either discipline would suffer if pursued in isolation, and that was his fundamental concern from the beginning of his career to the very end.
After excavating 16 years in the Holy Land, Albright returned to America, where he exerted enormous influence as an author and instructor.
As a teacher, he was without peer. He left a legacy of PhDs, the likes of which has never been before, Jewish and Christian and Catholic scholars, every stripe of persuasion and belief that you can imagine.
It was the dawn of a new generation of biblical explorers. Fate decreed some of them to unearth the Holy Land's most magnificent treasures. One of them was an Israeli war hero, destined to become a living legend. When Israel rose again as a modern state in 1948, one driven patriot emerged as its most outstanding archaeologist. His name was Yigael Yadin. But Yadin was more than an archaeologist. He was one of Israel's most brilliant military commanders. As the Army's chief of staff, he helped Israel win its independence. And in 1967, he was instrumental in Israel's lightning victories during the Six-Day War. But it was Yadin's phenomenal success as a biblical archaeologist that secured his place as a national hero.
He was a giant in every way. I had the privilege of working for him in the field, studying with him in the classroom at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and he was inspirational as a teacher, but a bit fearsome, awesome in the field as a mentor because of the militaristic way he ran his digs.
In 1955, Yigael Yadin advanced with his army of excavators to the ruins of the ancient city of Hatzor. Here, more than 3,000 years ago, another army, led by a warrior named Joshua, is said to have won a crucial victory.
Joshua at that time turned back and took Hatzor, and smote the king thereof with the sword. And they smote all the souls that were therein with the sword, utterly destroying them, and he burnt Hatzor with fire. Joshua 10:10.
Hatzor, the Bible tells us, is destroyed by Joshua and the invading Israelites as part of a sweeping military conquest of Canaan, commanded by God. When Hatzor, Canaan's last stronghold, falls, the promised land at last is theirs. In the city's ruins, Yadin's excavators found telltale layers of ash. A devastating fire, Yadin concluded, had indeed consumed Hatzor.
When he found that the great lower city had been destroyed sometime before 1200 BCE, he decided that that was the work of Joshua and the invading Israelite armies, exactly as the story has it in the book of Joshua.
Yadin acknowledged, however, that evidence at other sites, such as Jericho, contradicted the biblical account. Today, Joshua's story of a sweeping conquest of Canaan remains a mystery.
Did it really happen like the Bible says it happened? The universal consensus is that it didn't. Some parts of the Joshua story are clearly historical, but other parts are very problematical from an archaeological point of view.
Yadin's passion for archaeology never waned in the face of such perplexity. Hatzor, he felt certain, held the key to one additional and vexing mystery.
Solomon used forced labor to build a temple and the palace, and to rebuild the city of Hatzor. 1 Kings 9:15.
300 years after Joshua destroys Hatzor, the Bible tells us, Israel's legendary leader Solomon rebuilds it as a military fortress. Yadin suspected that beneath this rubble was a wealth of literary material compiled during Solomon's reign.
Professor Yadin believed that he would find the royal archives of King Solomon in the great city of Hatzor. He, alas, died before he had a chance to look for them. His students are now continuing the search.
At Hatzor today, the search for the archive is being led by Yigael Yadin's protege, Amnon Ben Tor.
It seems, the orientation is, but there is nothing similar to it if you look at this process.
As a student, Ben Tor dug for Yadin here 40 years ago. Now he has returned to carry on his mentor's mission. What he has unearthed thus far is promising.
We found two documents. One of them is a letter to the king of Hatzor. It demonstrates to us that there is an archive under our feet. Somewhere in this enormous complex, there is an archive.
If Solomon's archive is to be discovered at Hatzor, scholars are confident it will represent a quantum leap forward in our understanding of the history of the biblical world.
That, if it happens, will be sensational. That will be the great archaeological find of the century, if it happens.
In 1960, Yigael Yadin left Hatzor to follow the lure of mysteries elsewhere in the Holy Land. He directed his attention to a majestic fortress rising from the desert floor near the Dead Sea, Masada. Here, the ancient historian Josephus tells us, occurred another critical chapter in Israelite history. 1,300 years after Joshua's conquest, Israel is engaged in a fierce struggle for freedom against Imperial Rome. 960 Jewish rebels besieged atop Masada commit mass suicide rather than be enslaved by the Romans.
Let our wives die before they are abused, and our children before they have tasted slavery. Josephus, The Jewish War.
After 2 years of painstaking work, Yadin discovered both support and contradiction of the Josephus account. He was elated to find 11 pottery fragments etched with names. These coincided with Josephus' description of how the rebels drew lots to determine their fate. With these bits of clay, perhaps, the rebels decided who was to take the lives of their fellow patriots. But Yadin was disheartened as he found only 25 skeletons, far short of the 960 Josephus says perished here. Unanswered questions and mysteries still persist.
Masada is a fabulous site. It was well excavated. It is now being published in the final reports. And the results will be interesting to scholars in many fields. But exactly to what degree that story confirms the historicity of the accounts in Josephus probably should remain an open question.
At Masada, Yadin launched a bold new approach to archaeology. For the first time, masses of volunteers aided in a major excavation. 2 of these eager recruits were a young newlywed couple, Eric and Carol Myers. Caught up in Yadin's vision of Masada, they decided to spend their honeymoon in a romantic quest for their biblical roots.
I followed my heart. I followed adventure. I followed the idea of doing something that I had always wanted to do. And I think that Eric felt pretty much the same way.
It was an adventure that we'll never forget. And climbing up the rock at daybreak and seeing rosy colored dawn break over the rock of Masada and over the hills of Edom in Moab on the other side of the Dead Sea in Jordan was just thrilling, and I'll never get that picture out of my mind. The tone and excitement that was set in that excavation enthralled us in a way that made us do it for the rest of our lives.
For Eric and Carol Myers, Masada was only the beginning of one of biblical archaeology's most illustrious partnerships. Masada, Israel's towering monument to ancient heroism, shrouded for 2,000 years in mystery. For two newlywed students of archaeology, Eric and Carol Myers, there was no more appropriate setting to begin a lifetime together exploring the biblical past. Today, the students have become the teachers. Consummate professionals in their field, they have discovered some of the Holy Land's most intriguing treasures. Their greatest strength is their passion for the past.
We felt to engage in the past, the best way to truly engage in the past was to get dirty and down in the trenches and feel it and do it.
You know, lots of people ask me to this very day, well, what are you looking for when you go to the Near East? What are you looking for when you're excavating at Sepphoris or at Tel Gezer or at Masada? And that question comes out of a kind of treasure-seeking notion about what archaeology is, that you're going to look for a gold treasure. It's, I think, very much fed by the Raiders of the Lost Ark mentality, that you're looking for the lost so-and-so. You want to solve a mystery.
Ironically, the Myers were to discover a treasure in an uncanny parallel to the exploits of Indiana Jones. July 2nd, 1981. In the hills of Galilee, Eric and Carol Myers were excavating the ancient city of Nabratin. At 7:30 that morning, they unearthed a chunk of limestone, mysteriously out of place amidst the rubble. They suspected the secret of the stone lay in its concealed underside. To learn that secret, they began the laborious task of lifting the half-ton fragment.
It was only after we had gotten it right side up and we all had a chance to look at it that I think the full weight and meaning of the discovery was acknowledged by me and by my colleagues.
What Eric and Carol Myers resurrected from the ruins that morning would capture the imagination of millions. A fragment of an ancient ark, by far the oldest ever discovered, a cousin to its legendary predecessor, the mysterious and mystical Ark of the Covenant. The Ark remains Judaism's most holy symbol, the repository for the 10 Commandments brought down from Mount Sinai by Moses. The Ark of Nabratin is its direct descendant. As dramatic a discovery as this was, it would be amplified by a bizarre twist of fate. On that same day, in 1981, that the Myers found the Ark, moviegoers were cheering a new hero named Indiana Jones. His quest for the Ark of the Covenant had primed the public appetite.
What we were quick to emphasize to our press officer was that we had not found a fragment of the biblical Ark of the Covenant, but only of its religious descendant in terms of synagogue archaeology. He said, that doesn't matter. You discovered an ark.
Overnight, the Myers propelled biblical archaeology into the mainstream. But sudden celebrity never deflected them from their chosen mission. In 1987, in the ruins of a city called Sepphoris, they would once again experience the breathless moment of a major discovery.
look at the lovely
It began as they unearthed a magnificent mosaic floor.
two hunters, one catching a bird and the other hitting an alligator on the head.
It was a meticulous work of pagan art, depicting the adventures of the Roman god Dionysus. Then, beneath the dust, they found the exquisite features of a woman of mesmerizing beauty, whose eyes had been blanketed by ancient rubble for 1,700 years.
My first thought was, my goodness, what a face. That face really held and captured one's attention immediately. That stare and that look from her eyes really was riveting.
But who was this beguiling female?
The identity of this woman is still a mystery. Maybe if she weren't so beautiful, we wouldn't be so interested in figuring out who she might be, who she might have been.
No one's ever going to be able to tell us who was the model, who was the woman behind the picture. She is a mystery woman.
Inspired by her timeless beauty and charm, the Mayas dubbed her the Mona Lisa of the Galilee. From Sepphoris to Nabratin and throughout the Holy Land, Eric and Carol Meyer's journey of discovery is never-ending. As archaeologists, they feel an intimate kinship with the soil they explore.
Judaism and Christianity were born on this little plot of land 2,000 years ago. That's what brought me there, that's what keeps me there, that's what continues to fascinate me about that place, and I suspect it will till I die.
Today's archaeologists in the Holy Land have one great advantage over their predecessors: high technology. A spade in one hand, a Bible in the other. Such is the romantic notion of the biblical archaeologist. But it's a notion that belies the complexities of this unusual discipline. Today's biblical explorers come equipped with the most sophisticated tools of science. High technology allows them to answer the archaeologist's age-old challenge, where to dig. Until recently, such a determination could be made based solely on professional instinct. Now, ground-penetrating radar enables them to detect promising sites without ever striking spade to earth. A mobile radar unit sends electromagnetic impulses into the earth. Bouncing back from obstructions, these impulses reveal underground anomalies, which are translated into images on a computer monitor. The radar can detect artifacts, buildings, even entire buried cities. It has enabled archaeologists to eliminate enormous amounts of random digging. But the tools of sophisticated science go far beyond locating the wonders of the biblical past. At DNA research facilities, archaeologists may soon be able to extract secrets even from the human remains of those who populated the world of the Bible. Though buried for untold centuries, the bones of the ancients contain vital genetic clues, which can tell us much about who they were.
When I was a student, if anyone had described that kind of analysis, people would have laughed at them. Today, it's a tool that's gradually coming into use, an expensive and complicated tool, but one that in the end may prove enlightening.
Without question, the most significant new tool of archaeologists is the computer. With it, they have begun to open fascinating new worlds of discovery.
When I was a graduate student, we hadn't heard of computers yet, and we couldn't have imagined how computers would transform the field. Today, we can do things with computers that are stunning. In my day, when you excavated a building, you drew a flat plan of it. You might have an artist or an architect do a kind of three-dimensional reconstruction, but that was about all you can do. Today, we can use computers not only to reconstruct the building in all of its details, but we can manipulate the model in various ways so as to reveal things we never would have dreamed of knowing.
At Princeton University, computer experts recently took on a daunting challenge: to graphically resurrect the ancient city of Jerusalem. It was a problematic project for Dr. Oleg Grabar and his task force, for though Jerusalem has endured since the days of antiquity, its ancient face has become obscured by the modern.
The city of today is cluttered with buildings, with people, with TV aerials, with all kinds of new things. They take away from what the city did look like in the past. As a historian, I wanted to reconstruct that past and to remove the contemporary skin.
With the aid of the computer, we can descend into a long-lost Jerusalem that previously could only be imagined. In this vivid recreation, we can walk in the very footsteps of patriarchs and prophets, kings and common men, and Jesus. Marvels of technology such as this continue to revolutionize the field of archaeology. But veterans in the discipline realize that even the most advanced tools of science will always have limits.
Sometimes people have the notion that new scientific techniques will render old-fashioned, hand-done fieldwork obsolete, but that's not true. There really is no substitute for the human hand and eye and intelligence. Archaeology will always be done, in some senses, in the old-fashioned way.
At computers or in the field, biblical archaeologists search out history because they believe the past may be prologue. By discovering where we have been, they hope to grant us greater insight into where we are now and where we're going.
Only through the prism of the past can we hope to really confront the present with any vision and understanding.
Helping us gain that vision is a new generation of biblical explorers. They carry with them the same dedication and affection for their work as those who have shown them the way.
If we've done nothing more than pass on to our students and to the people with whom we've worked the love of the discipline, the love of the discovery, the love of the past that we have, I think that we will have done something that's very important.